He was just a janitor trying to make ends meet, until a billionaire's child walked into his life at midnight. The night smelled faintly of rain and concrete when Malik Turner swiped his badge and pushed open the glass doors of the Kensington Plaza, a towering office building in downtown Indianapolis. Midnight shifts weren't new to him, but something about tonight felt heavier. Maybe it was the empty streets outside, or the fact that his 6-year-old daughter, Ava, was clutching his hand, her tiny fingers cold against his calloused ones. "Daddy, is it going to take long?" she whispered, her eyes wide like she already knew the answer. Malik smiled down at her, forcing a little light into his voice. "Just a few hours, baby girl. You can sit by the desk and color like last time, all right?" Ava nodded, her curls bouncing as she hugged a faded pink backpack to her chest. Inside it were crayons, 2 coloring books, and a pack of fruit snacks she insisted on carrying everywhere. Malik felt a pang of guilt twist in his stomach. She should have been home in bed, not wandering around a skyscraper while her father scrubbed toilets. But the sitter canceled last minute, and missing work wasn't an option. Bills didn't wait. Neither did life. He swiped his ID again at the maintenance door and stepped into the dim hallway. The air was cool, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner, a scent Malik knew too well. He placed his bucket down and looked at Ava. "Stay close, all right?" "Yes, Daddy." She said it in that soft, trusting tone that always broke him a little. He hated that this was normal for her. No kid should grow up thinking late-night janitor runs were part of childhood. As they walked, Malik thought about how different life had been 6 years ago, before her mom left, before everything got hard. He shook it off. Thinking like that never paid a bill. When they reached the gleaming marble lobby, Malik let out a low whistle. Even after 2 years, this place amazed him. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering city lights like a picture. Polished chrome elevators lined the wall, and the glass mezzanine above looked like something out of a movie. To people who worked here during the day, this was just another office building. To Malik, it was another world. He parked his mop bucket near the reception desk, pulled on his gloves, and turned to Ava. "Color right here, okay? Where I can see you." She plopped onto a chair and dumped her crayons out like they were treasure. Malik smiled, kissed the top of her head, and got to work. The mop glided across the glossy floor, each stroke a rhythm Malik knew by heart. Swish, twist, ring. Bills, rent, food. Swish, twist, ring. He found peace in the motion. It was honest work. Maybe not glamorous, but it kept his little girl fed. 15 minutes in, Ava hummed softly while coloring. Malik glanced at her, grateful for how easily she adapted. He wished he could give her more. Birthday parties with balloons, vacations by the beach. But all he could give her now was love. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. But then, something broke the quiet. A sound. Not Ava's voice, not the distant whir of an elevator. It was soft at first, like a hiccup, then another's, then a sob. Malik froze, mop in hand. His eyes scanned the lobby. That's when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 7, sitting alone in the corner by the huge glass doors. Her silk dress shimmered under the fluorescent lights, but her face was wet with tears. Her tiny shoulders shook as she buried her face in her knees. Malik blinked, unsure for a second if he was imagining it. Who leaves a kid alone in a place like this at midnight? He dropped the mop back into the bucket and looked at Ava. She had noticed, too, her crayon frozen mid-line. "Daddy, who's that?" she whispered. "I don't know, baby," Malik murmured, his voice low, his heart already pounding. But he knew one thing. Something wasn't right. And as Malik walked slowly toward that crying child, he had no idea his life was about to collide with a world he didn't belong to. Malik crouched down next to Ava, his voice soft. "Stay here, baby girl. Don't move, okay?" Ava nodded slowly, her big brown eyes flicking toward the sobbing stranger in the corner. Malik gave her a reassuring smile. At least he hoped it looked reassuring, and then he walked across the gleaming marble floor. Each step shifted through the vast lobby, the sound sharp in the late-night stillness. The closer he got, the more his stomach knotted. She was so small. Too small to be sitting alone in a place like this, dressed like she belonged at a gala instead of crying on a cold floor. Her dress was pale blue satin, and her shiny shoes didn't have a single scuff. Whoever this kid was, she wasn't just anybody's child. He slowed his pace, not wanting to scare her. "Hey, sweetheart." His voice was gentle, almost a whisper. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched, lifting her head slightly. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, and her eyes, big and glassy, looked straight through him for a moment before darting away. Malik knelt down, keeping his distance. "You lost? Where's your mom or dad?" She didn't answer, just sniffled and clutched the hem of her dress like it was the only thing keeping her together. Malik's heart squeezed. He'd seen kids cry before, but this was different. This was the kind of cry that comes from fear, not just sadness. He glanced around the empty lobby, not a soul in sight. Whoever brought her here wasn't anywhere near. That made his chest tighten even more. "Okay, that's all right," he murmured softly, like he was talking to Ava on one of her tough nights. "You don't have to talk yet. I'm Malik. I work here. I just want to help, okay?" The girl's lips trembled, but she still didn't speak. Malik sighed inwardly, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. He wished he had something, anything, to make this easier. Then his eyes fell on his cart, the cleaning supplies, the mop, the old rag bag, and tucked inside, half hidden beneath some rags, a little plastic bottle of magic. Bubbles. He always carried them for Ava, kept them in his bag like a secret weapon for bad days. A smile tugged at his lips. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. But before he reached for it, he glanced back at Ava. She was perched on the chair, watching every move he made. Malik gave her a nod, a silent promise that he had this under control. He turned back to the crying girl and lowered his voice again. "Hey, I know things feel scary right now, but I got something that always helps when my little girl's upset. You want to see?" No response, just more quiet sniffling. But that was okay. Malik reached into his cart, fingers closing around the small bottle. He twisted the cap slowly and pulled out the little wand, careful not to drip on the marble floor. When he blew the first stream, the bubbles floated out like tiny glass spheres, catching the lobby lights and throwing back little rainbows. One drifted right in front of the girl's face, and for the first time she looked up. Malik grinned, blowing again. Another bubble, then another. Soon the air around them shimmered with color. The girl's sobs softened, replaced by the tiniest gasp of wonder. She reached out a small hand, almost afraid to touch the fragile orbs dancing in front of her. Malik chuckled softly. "See that? Magic, right?" Her eyes flicked toward him, and for a second, he thought she might speak. Instead, she just brushed a bubble with her fingertip and watched it pop. It wasn't much, but it was something. Malik kept going, blowing bubble after bubble, watching the tension melt from her tiny shoulders. Behind him, Ava slid off the chair and tiptoed over, her little voice carrying a spark of excitement. "Daddy, can I try?" Malik smiled at her. "Sure, baby girl. Go ahead." Ava dipped the wand and blew, laughing as a cluster of bubbles floated high toward the mezzanine above. Malik's chest loosened. For the first time all night, the air felt lighter. But Malik didn't notice the pair of sharp, watchful eyes staring down at them from that glass balcony. The eyes of someone who could change everything. The bubbles floated upward, fragile and glowing like tiny pearls against the sleek glass and steel. For a moment, Malik almost forgot where he was, forgot about the bills, the long hours, and the exhaustion clinging to his bones. All he saw was two little girls, one his own, the other a mystery, giggling softly under the shimmer of floating orbs. But reality crept back in when he noticed the tear streaks still drying on the stranger's cheeks. Whoever she was, this wasn't just a tantrum. Something had happened. Malik knew that look too well. The hollow, lost expression of someone who feels like their world just flipped upside down. He crouched again, his knees popping quietly against the hard floor. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "what's your name?" The girl hesitated, fingers twisting in the satin of her dress. For a second, he thought she'd stay silent again. Then, barely above a whisper, he heard it. "Olivia." Malik offered a gentle smile. "That's a pretty name." "Olivia, huh? You know, my little girl's name is Ava." He tilted his head toward his daughter, who was still blowing bubbles with a determined little puff. "She's 6. How old are you?" Olivia wiped her face with the back of her hand. 7, Malik repeated, like it was a badge of honor. "Wow, big girl." A tiny laugh almost escaped her, but it got lost halfway. Malik noticed. He noticed everything. The trembling lip, the way her voice cracked, the way she kept glancing toward the giant glass doors like she was waiting for someone to walk through. He softened his tone. "Where's your mom or dad, Olivia? They here with you?" Her gaze darted away again, and Malik's chest tightened. Something was off. Maybe they left her by mistake? No, that dress, those shoes, the way she carried herself. Nobody forgets a kid like this. Olivia whispered something he almost didn't catch. "Mom, she was talking to somebody. Then she told me to sit here." Malik's brows knitted. "And that was how long ago?" Olivia shrugged, her little fingers digging into the satin of her dress. "I don't know. A long time." Malik bit the inside of his cheek. He didn't want to scare her, but his stomach was twisting harder by the second. What kind of parent leaves a child alone this late? He glanced at his watch. Past midnight. The building was practically empty except for security 2 floors up, and they barely paid attention to anything that didn't trigger an alarm. He kept his voice calm. "Okay. Well, you did the right thing staying here. I'll keep you company until your mom comes back, all right?" Olivia nodded slowly, her eyes flicking up to meet his for just a second. That small look, it was like a lifeline, like she wanted so badly to trust someone. Behind him, Ava piped up, waving the bubble wand like a magic wand. "Daddy, she likes the bubbles. Can I give her a turn?" Malik smiled. "Sure, baby girl. Ask if she wants to." Ava tiptoed closer, holding out the wand. "You want to try?" Olivia stared at it for a long second. Then, so carefully, like she was afraid to break the spell, she nodded. Ava grinned and placed the wand in her hand. Malik watched as Olivia blew, her breath shaky at first, then steadier. When the bubbles floated up, she let out a tiny giggle. Just one, but it was enough to make Malik's chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. For a brief, fragile moment, the cold marble lobby felt warm. 2 little girls playing, a single dad on his knees, watching them like it was the best thing he'd seen all week. But what Malik couldn't see, what he didn't even think to look for, was the figure standing behind the glass railing above, eyes locked on every move, arms crossed tight. And those eyes weren't just watching, they were calculating. The bubbles drifted higher now, catching the glow from the chandelier overhead, scattering rainbows across the polished floor. Malik leaned back on his heels, watching the tension melt from Olivia's little face as she blew another stream into the air. Her giggle, soft, hesitant, was like music. Ava clapped her hands. "See? You're really good at it," she said, her voice ringing through the empty lobby like a tiny bell. Olivia smiled faintly, a fragile thing, but it was there. Malik let out a slow breath. Whatever storm had brought this child here tonight, at least for now, it was quiet. "Daddy," Ava said, tugging his sleeve, "can we make the big bubbles, like at the park?" Malik chuckled. "Baby girl, Daddy's got work to do, but maybe after I finish this floor we can." Ava grinned and skipped back toward the reception desk, humming a tune only she knew. Malik watched her for a moment, then turned back to Olivia. "You're pretty good at that," he said, nodding toward the bubbles still floating between them. Olivia gave a tiny shrug, like praise was something foreign to her. Malik didn't push. He just sat there, letting the silence breathe. Sometimes, silence fixed more than words could. But even as he smiled at the child in front of him, a thought gnawed at him. Where the hell is her mom? It wasn't his business, he reminded himself. He was a janitor, not a social worker. But leaving a kid alone in a building this size, at this hour, that wasn't right. He opened his mouth to say something when a sound pricked his ears, soft footsteps above. Malik glanced up instinctively toward the mezzanine, but the glass railing reflected nothing but shimmering light and shadows. He shook it off. Probably security doing their rounds. Still, the back of his neck tingled. "Olivia," he said gently, "how about we sit by the desk for a while? Just until your mom comes back. Safer there." Olivia hesitated, her grip on the bubble wand tightening. Then she nodded. Malik helped her to her feet and guided her toward the big desk where Ava had already spread crayons like confetti. As the two girls sat side by side, Ava chattering about her favorite color, Malik knelt beside them, pretending to sort through his mop cart while his mind ran circles. Should he call security? No. Last thing he needed was to cause trouble or get accused of something. Still, his gut told him something wasn't normal here, and Malik had learned long ago, trust your gut. Upstairs, behind the glass railing, Charlotte Kensington stood frozen, her manicured hands gripping the steel frame so tightly her knuckles paled. She hadn't planned to linger. After the board meeting, she'd walked back to her office to grab her tablet and then heard it. The faint sound of crying echoing through the lobby. She rushed out, expecting to find her daughter in distress. What she hadn't expected was this. Her Olivia, sitting cross-legged on the marble floor, with a janitor. And not just any janitor. A tall man in worn sneakers, calloused hands, and a uniform that had seen better days. His little girl by his side, both of them laughing softly with hers, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Charlotte's chest tightened. When was the last time Olivia laughed like that? When was the last time her own presence brought that kind of light to her daughter's face? It hit her like a punch. She couldn't remember. For a moment, Charlotte just stood there, staring, her throat thick. Something about the way that man looked at her child, gentle, patient, like she mattered, stirred something she hadn't felt in years. But the thought was short-lived because another thought crashed through it like glass. What is he doing with her? Why is my daughter sitting on the floor with a stranger? Her nails bit into her palm. She straightened, her jaw tightening. Whatever this was, she was about to end it. What Charlotte didn't know was that her next move wouldn't just change this moment. It would alter the course of all three lives in ways none of them saw coming. Charlotte stayed behind the glass railing for a few seconds longer, her heels rooted to the mezzanine floor as if welded there. Her heartbeat thudded louder than the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. She'd planned on striding down immediately, but something she couldn't quite name, made her pause. It wasn't fear. No, Charlotte Kensington didn't fear anyone. Not competitors, not board members, not the press. But right now, staring down at her child sitting cross-legged on a cold marble floor next to a man in a janitor's uniform, she felt unsteady. Her daughter wasn't crying anymore. That alone was shocking. 10 minutes ago, Olivia had been inconsolable, red-faced, trembling, barely able to speak after Charlotte had stepped away to take a call from an overseas investor. It wasn't supposed to take that long. She thought she'd be back in 5 minutes, 10 at most. And yet, when she returned, Olivia was gone. Panic had surged through Charlotte like a live wire until she spotted her here, safe, but in the company of a stranger. Charlotte's grip tightened on the railing. He wasn't touching her, but he was too close. Much too close. His little girl sat beside Olivia, talking animatedly while coloring, completely oblivious to the line Charlotte believed existed between their worlds. Charlotte's world was high-rise offices and chauffeured cars, deals signed in glass towers, every hour accounted for. Malik's world, if his scuffed sneakers and industrial-strength gloves were any indication, was something entirely different. And yet, there was something disarming about the way he crouched down beside the girls, the way his face softened when Olivia smiled. He looked safe. Charlotte hated that the word even crossed her mind. Enough of this, she told herself. She had to reclaim control, restore order. She straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and descended the mezzanine stairs with the crisp precision of someone who owned every inch of this building. Her heels clicked against the polished steps like a countdown. Malik heard it first, the sharp rhythm of expensive shoes against stone. He turned his head, and the moment his eyes landed on her, he knew. Not just because of the tailored navy suit or the subtle shimmer of jewelry at her wrists. It was in her posture, her expression, the kind of presence you can't fake. Whoever this woman was, she belonged to a world Malik had never even stepped close to. And judging by the fire in her gaze, she was not happy. Olivia looked up and saw her mother halfway down the stairs. "Mommy!" she blurted, springing to her feet. Charlotte quickened her pace, closing the distance in a matter of seconds. She crouched slightly, placing her hands on Olivia's shoulders and scanning her face like she needed proof her daughter was unharmed. "Are you all right? Did he—" She stopped herself, swallowing the rest of the question as her eyes flicked toward Malik. He stayed still, shoulders squared, mop handle resting against the cart like a soldier standing at ease. His gaze met hers, not challenging, not timid, just steady. "Your little girl was upset," Malik said calmly, his deep voice carrying no apology, no arrogance, just truth. "I didn't want to leave her crying alone." Charlotte's jaw tightened. She rose to her full height, and even in heels, she had to tilt her chin slightly to look him in the eye. "You work here?" Her tone was clipped, cold enough to frost glass. "Yes, ma'am." "And you thought it was appropriate to, what, entertain my daughter instead of calling security?" Malik's jaw flexed once, but his voice stayed even. "I thought it was appropriate to make sure she felt safe. That's all." Charlotte's lips parted like she had a retort ready, but the words tangled somewhere between her pride and the undeniable fact that Olivia looked calmer now than she had in weeks. Still, Charlotte Kensington didn't back down. Not yet. Because as her gaze locked on Malik's, something told her this wasn't just going to be a conversation. This was about to become a clash, and neither of them planned on walking away unchanged. Charlotte's heels clicked against the marble as she closed the last few steps between them. Her posture was perfect, her expression unreadable, but Malik could feel the judgment radiating off her like heat from an open flame. Olivia clung to her mother's arm, eyes darting nervously between them. Ava, sensing the tension, shuffled closer to Malik and slid her tiny hand into his. Malik gave her fingers a gentle squeeze, never breaking eye contact with the woman in front of him. "You didn't answer my question," Charlotte said, her voice low, controlled. "Why didn't you call security?" Malik took a slow breath. "Because your daughter didn't need security. She needed someone to care that she was crying." Charlotte's lips tightened, a flicker of something crossing her face before her icy mask returned. "And you assumed that someone should be you?" Malik's jaw ticked, but his voice stayed calm. "I didn't assume anything. I saw a scared little girl sitting alone past midnight, and I did what any decent person would do." Charlotte studied him, her sharp gaze searching for something she couldn't quite place. He didn't look intimidated. Most people in this building looked at her like royalty. He didn't. Her eyes dropped briefly to his calloused hands, the uniform that smelled faintly of bleach and soap. He was a janitor, nothing more. Yet, in the way he stood, shoulders squared and chin level, there was a quiet dignity that caught her off guard. "I'm her mother," Charlotte said finally, her tone clipped like she needed to remind both of them who held the power here. Malik nodded once. "Then maybe you should have been here instead of leaving her by herself." The words landed like a slap. Charlotte's breath hitched, her spine stiffening. Nobody spoke to her like that, not employees, not even board members. Her instinct was to lash out, to shut him down with the kind of words that could slice steel. But then she felt Olivia's small hand tug her sleeve. "Mommy, he was nice," Olivia whispered, eyes wide. "He made bubbles for me." Charlotte blinked. Slowly her gaze drifted toward the bottle of bubbles sitting on the edge of the cart, a cheap plastic thing you'd find in a dollar store. And yet, her daughter was looking at it like it was treasure. For a fleeting moment, Charlotte felt something crack inside her armor. Malik noticed it, the way her shoulders softened, just barely. He didn't press, though. He just stood there, calm and steady, his daughter's hand still curled in his. Charlotte cleared her throat, straightening like she needed to shake it off. "You work nights here?" "Yes, ma'am, 5 nights a week." "Do you always bring your child with you?" "Only when I have no choice," Malik said simply. "I don't like it, but sitters cancel, and bills don't wait." There it was again, that raw honesty that made her chest feel strangely tight. She wasn't used to it. Her world was polished, scripted, calculated, but this man spoke like he had nothing to prove. Charlotte folded her arms, her gaze dropping to Ava, who now sat quietly, watching them like a little owl. "She looks tired." "She is," Malik said softly. "But I don't get to choose easy. Not in my world." Charlotte opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. Malik broke the silence. "Look, I didn't mean to step out of line. I've been where she is. Scared. Alone. Sometimes, all it takes is somebody to show up." Something about those words, "I've been where she is," hit Charlotte like a gut punch. She glanced at Olivia, at the way her daughter leaned slightly toward this man who had been a stranger 10 minutes ago. And then, for reasons Charlotte couldn't explain, the fight drained out of her. "You really have no idea who I am, do you?" she asked suddenly, her tone softer than before. Malik tilted his head, puzzled. "Should I?" Charlotte almost laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I own this building, and a few dozen more like it." She watched his face, waiting for the shift, shock, awe, maybe a hint of apology. But Malik didn't flinch. He just nodded once. "Good for you." Charlotte blinked. "That's it? Good for me?" "What do you want me to say?" Malik asked, his tone calm, almost tired. "That money makes you better than me? That it makes your little girl any less lonely?" "It doesn't." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then slowly, Charlotte exhaled, her shoulders sinking a fraction. He was right, and she hated that he was right. Olivia clutched her mother's hand, whispering softly, "Mommy, can Ava come play with me again sometime?" Charlotte stared down at her daughter, something unfamiliar tugging at her chest. When she looked back at Malik, her voice was quieter. "What's your name?" "Malik Turner," he said. Charlotte nodded slowly, filing the name away. Something told her this wasn't the last time she'd say it. But what neither of them realized was that this tense encounter was about to spark a chain of decisions that would turn both of their worlds upside down, forever. Charlotte stood there longer than she intended, her fingers lightly brushing Olivia's shoulder as if grounding herself. Malik waited, not with expectation, but with that same calm steadiness he'd carried from the moment she first saw him. There was no groveling, no attempt to impress. Just a man holding his daughter's hand, ready to finish a shift most people would look down on without a second thought. For reasons Charlotte couldn't fully explain, something inside her shifted. "Malik," she said slowly, testing the name, "you shouldn't have to choose between your job and keeping your daughter safe." His brows lifted slightly, but his voice stayed even. "That's the choice life gives me right now. Doesn't mean I'll stop doing right by her." He glanced at Ava, who yawned and leaned against his leg. "She's my world." Charlotte swallowed, her throat tight. When was the last time I thought of Olivia like that? When was the last time I put her before everything else? Her mind flashed through late nights at the office, missed bedtimes, broken promises wrapped in expensive gifts. She thought those things were enough, proof of love measured in price tags. But watching her daughter's eyes light up over a plastic bubble wand made those excuses feel small. "Do you have family who helps?" she asked quietly. Malik shook his head. "It's just me. Been just me since Ava was 2. Charlotte felt something twist in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but for once, she didn't have the perfect words. All she could manage was, "You're doing a good job." Malik blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Compliments weren't something he got often, not from people in suits worth more than his annual salary. "Thank you," he said simply. Olivia tugged her mother's sleeve, her little voice breaking the silence. "Mommy, can we stay a little longer? Please?" Charlotte hesitated. She had a car waiting outside, a conference call in less than an hour. A life that never allowed for pauses. But looking at her daughter's hopeful face and the man who'd given her peace when Charlotte couldn't, she made a choice. 5 more minutes, she whispered. Olivia grinned and plopped back down beside Ava, giggling as they dipped the wand into the bubble solution. Charlotte stood there watching them, the weight of her schedule fading for the first time in years. Malik bent to pick up his mop, but Charlotte's voice stopped him. "Malik, if you ever need help, with childcare, with anything, call my office." He turned, brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because you reminded me of something I forgot," she said softly. "What really matters." For a long second, their eyes held. Two people from different worlds, bound by something bigger than wealth or status, the simple, stubborn power of love for a child. Charlotte didn't know it yet, but this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. And Malik, he didn't know it either, but tonight had planted a seed that would change everything. As Malik packed up his cart and gathered Ava into his arms, he looked back one last time. Charlotte was kneeling now, helping Olivia blow bubbles, her laughter carrying through the empty lobby like sunlight breaking through clouds. And in that moment, Malik understood. It's not about the life you start with. It's about the choices you make when someone needs you most. Moral of the story? Kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. Never underestimate what a simple act of compassion can do. It might be the lifeline someone else is praying for. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder. Love and humanity matter more than status or wealth. And if you believe that too, keep spreading that light.